Backers of California's Proposition 22 promised that rideshare drivers would receive a healthcare stipend under the new law. However, a report conducted by Rideshare Drivers United and the National Equity Atlas found that in the nearly 10 months since the legislation was passed, many rideshare drivers have not accessed the stipend.
In a survey of California rideshare drivers, a whopping 40% have, quote, never heard if they qualify for the stipends or weren't sure if they had received notification. 29% report they're on Medi-Cal, a public insurance option for people 138% or more over the poverty line. 16% have no health insurance at all. So this is really interesting that this was struck down. So essentially now the courts are saying, no, you can't strip workers of their rights. They have to be able to access these rights, is what it sounds like, but this is going to be tied up for maybe a while before this actually is implemented.
Yeah, not to be, pessimistic, but it sounds like the goal here with like a major lobbying effort from some of the companies represented, Uber, DoorDash, et cetera, Lyft, the goal was simply to get the cover of saying, of course, we're giving you these stipends, but with no actual plan to communicate to their employees how, in fact, to get those stipends, is what it sounds like based on the fact that so few people even seem to realize they existed.
Yeah, well, I mean, why would they, right? I mean, and that's costly. So if they can get fewer people to access them, the better for them.
Right.
But yes.
Yeah, I mean, what we found is that even benefits like the child tax credit, that gives $250 to $300 a month per person, is difficult to get out to every single person who's eligible for it. And that's a fairly straightforward benefit. Mm-hmm. And that is a government that is incentivized to try to find the people, who are on the receiving end of this benefit. With companies like Uber and Lyft, you have the opposite. You have an extremely complex benefit, and the person who's giving the benefit out is disincentivized from making sure that the person gets that benefit. And so right. we already know that under the best of circumstances, it's hard to reach people who need what they need where they are. This would be the worst of circumstances, because this is somebody who's like, burying the fact that this meager help for healthcare is available to people, and making it as difficult as possible for them to find out about it. And then if they find out about it, making it kludgy to actually access it, so that most people say, you know what, this isn't even worth my time.
And Prop 22 was meant to be this compromise between the gig economy and these large companies. The idea of it was, and I understand the plight of it myself, having once been an Uber and a Lyft driver. I understand that one of the draws to driving for Uber and Lyft is that you can do it when you want. It can be this supplemental job that you just turn on the app, you decide to get in your car and you say, okay, I'm going to go drive for a couple of hours, pick people up, make some extra cash. That is a big portion of the people that are driving for these companies. So if you turn them into employees, with this being struck down, and if they have to go back to the drawing board, if those types of people are turned into employees, they sort of lose this ability to set their own hours and decide how many they're going to work one week or how little they're going to work. But on the flip side, one of the reasons why I didn't drive for very long was because you quickly find out it's not really worth it financially in a lot of cases, that you're barely making minimum wage, if making minimum wage at all. So it's this, because there's a lot of time you're sitting there and you're not taking a ride. There's a lot of times where, in 1 hour, you only get one ride, right? So, and then there's these hot hours of, 5 o'clock rush hour where you're picking a lot of people up, and of course, airport runs and stuff like that. So this was meant to be this compromise of, okay, well, you could still be a gig worker and set your hours. So those of you that don't want to lose that, you don't have to. And for those of you that are really pulling all of these hours, because I think their rule was you have to have 25 active driving hours, which is really vague because, like I said, a lot of times you're just sitting and you're not actively driving. So you're essentially full-time at that point to get those 25 active driving hours. So then they're saying, well, okay, for those people, we're going to go ahead and give them these stipends and these benefits. And I think theoretically that maybe could have worked out well had the company been more proactive in actually telling people, hey, you have access to this. But I don't know if that would have done anything for this overall court ruling.
Right.
Well, and just real quick, no surprise to give kind of the conservative counterpoint to this. Prop 22 reminds me of aspects of the PRO Act, which is before Congress, which would more or less eliminate 1099, so contract-based work. And well-intentioned by liberals to make sure that we're giving healthcare coverage and different essential coverage to workers. What it in fact, I would worry it does is it hurts gig workers, people who, so I employ a couple of people who are 1099s. They work for me, but they also work for 3 other people. And that's something that gives them the flexibility, the financial stability. And if you eliminate that and say you have to be a full-time employee, I think it's fundamentally going to hurt hiring. It's going to hurt workers' ability to get jobs in this ever-evolving economy, but also businesses themselves. That just, it's going to take away from the top line. But Ryan, I'd be curious your thoughts.
Right. I mean, the difference is that an individual person, who's hiring an individual contractor, to do, window work or, whatever they're doing in their house is kind of negotiating, the rate that they're going to pay to that person. And that really does make it independent contracting. Like that is, those are 2 people independently coming to a contract. When it comes to Lyft and Uber, the drivers are not allowed to negotiate. Kim, you couldn't have been like, you know what? I don't feel like taking you to the airport for $24 today. How about $32? Because that's the mood that I'm in right now. And there's a lot of other cars out there, and this is what I feel like charging you to get to the airport. You're not allowed to do that.
We weren't even allowed to actually deny. We couldn't even find out, at least when I was doing it, where the person wanted to go. Mm-hmm. So right. I couldn't even reject it and say, I don't want to go to that part of town today, or I don't want to do a drive that's going to be 45 minutes. I was hoping to maybe just drive for like 15 minutes on my way home from my other thing. Right. Yeah, you don't get really any autonomy.
Right. If you don't have to go 2 hours just because you picked this person up. And so that means that you're not actually an independent contractor. Like you're not setting your own rates, and you're not even in that sense, in control of your own time. And so Uber and Lyft kind of want it both ways. They want to be able to say that these are all independent contractors. And they also want to say these people cannot collectively bargain because they are independent contractors. At the same time, they can't independently bargain with their customers over rates. And so that's just a fundamental contradiction that Uber and Lyft are just trying to use politics to power through. Like you can't have both. Either the people need to be able to set their own rates and accept or reject whoever they want, or they're W-2 people who should be able to collectively bargain. It doesn't mean they have to have a boss and they have to have a schedule and they have to have all these other accoutrements that come with W-2 work. You can be a W-2 worker and still be a gig type worker that you come in whenever you want. Mm-hmm. But so they have to sort that out, because they cannot continue to insist that these people are independent while giving them no independence.
I bet they can work it out. I'm just thinking about my dog walking service, for example. So there's 2 different apps that I use for dog walking when I need somebody in a pinch. One of them is controlled by the app. So the people don't get to set their pay. I request, it's kind of like requesting an Uber, and somebody accepts it. And, I know that they're going to be showing up. Another app, on the other hand, actually gives me a selection of people with their rates. So I can set out put out my, hey, I'm looking for a dog walker. And I can see all of the various people that are sort of bidding for the walk and giving me their rate of what it would cost. So maybe they could do something along those lines, sort of a compromise in there. I mean, look, those guys are smart. They got a lot of money. They can build the app however they want, right?
Well, the problem is I think all these ride sharing platforms were built for the goal of eventually going to full automation. So their money making model has never been based around their workers. Their goal is to not even have drivers in 5 years if they can get there, whether it's DoorDash, Lyft, Uber. So unfortunately, I don't feel like there's an incentive for them to try to do something that's more beneficial to their workers. It is funny though, I have seen drivers get around it by they'll accept an Uber rate and then negotiate with you to just pay privately. And I don't know if this is breaking the rules, but if I ever get the opportunity to just pay them cash, I do, because I know it goes straight to my driver and not to this major corporations that's giving him, 30% on the drive that he did.
You rebel, you, Alyssa.
And I think ultimately what it shows is if these gig companies do want to exploit people in this way, what we need is just a much more robust benefit system for people. Like, it shouldn't really be on Uber and Lyft to make sure that somebody can go to a doctor. Like that that's kind of absurd that we would even expect that. Like, that should be a collective responsibility that we all take care of. And if you do that, then people can do gig work, and if all their other basic needs are taken care of, there'd be much less pushback on it.
Yeah.
Well, again, to the point of keeping gig work as a 1099 kind of contract work, where you have the ability to do 3 or 4 different jobs if you want to, and if time is permitting, that also puts people in the best situation to be able to pay for and fund their health coverage, or contribute to something that's, whether it's a state-based exchange if you're in California or whatever it may be. So I do think giving that flexibility to workers of you don't have to be fully W-2, you don't have to be fully full-time with this one entity. You have the flexibility to do various contract work. It's the way to make the most money.
Mm-hmm. Well, we'll be keeping an eye on this to see what happens, since it will be tied up for a while, to see if this ends up being overturned. And this is really specifically, I think, more in my state, although I think it maybe has kind of had a ripple effect across the country. But we do have more Rising coming up next.